Hey everyone, it is about 1:20 p.m. on this TGIF Friday, December 5th, 2025. We are 20 days away from Christmas, and it is cloudy under 43 degrees. Yeah, 43 degrees under cloudy skies with a bit of sun peeking through. Apparently, according to the weather people, depending on who you believe, it's because of some fog that we have kind of hanging overhead that's caused by basically the elevations, the mountains, the hills getting some snow, and that's causing, I guess, a little bit of a after effect that's, making the Central Valley, at least where we're at, a little colder than usual. But according to them, hopefully by tomorrow things should get better. Hopefully. But anyway, though, before we get started with this video, which is a very topical one, everybody's talking about this ever since last night, and and that is, before we start, I'd like to ask you guys to do me a solid favor, and that's like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. Also, guys, if you would like, you can click on the links in the description to find my content elsewhere. You can find me at all of your favorite audio and video podcast platforms, which this will also be on. I'm guaranteeing you that this will go on to my podcast. But you can find my podcast over at outlets like iTunes, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music, Radio Public, and to an extent, SiriusXM and Pandora. Yes, Pandora actually. Let me kind of rephrase that. iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music, Pandora, Radio Public, and to an extent, SiriusXM. Basically, wherever there's a podcast to be found, you'll find mine. Also, if you like viewing other video outlets outside of YouTube, you can find me at rumble.com. You can find me at odyssey.com. You can find me at Dailymotion and Vimeo. Also, guys, you can find me at DeviantArt at deviantart.com at BVW1979 and at InkBunny, that's INKBUNNY, inkbunny.net at BWRosas, and for Affinity, basically at BW1979. You can find me there as well. Also, guys, I have a Patreon. That Patreon is going to get up and running real soon. I think you'll like the first thing that I put on there. Maybe not, but if you guys want to see what that is, 24 to 48 hours before anybody else does here on YouTube, then check it out, and it'll be under the $3 tier. The $3 tier if you want to check that out. Also, guys, I have a Cash App and a Venmo if you want to help support me there as well. And I have a Fourth Wall store and a Teespring store. The Fourth Wall store link will be at the top of the description, as well as the Teespring store link will be at the bottom. So go there, check those out, and find some items maybe for yourself and friends and family in time for the Christmas season. It would help me out tremendously, and I'm sure it would help you out as well. Also, guys, you can follow me through social media at TikTok, at Blue Sky, and Twitter, not formerly, but Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, but now known as X.com. That's what I was trying to say. Also, guys, I have some affiliated programs, basically stores, that will be listed. So if you guys want to look for something in time for the holiday season, Christmas and all that for yourself, for friends, family, go and check those stores out. It helps the stores out, it helps you out in your holiday shopping, and commission-wise, it helps me out. So if you want to do that, it'd be greatly appreciated. Also, guys, you can chime in the live chat during this live video premiere on this subject. Chime in, give your thoughts overall on how you feel about things, when it comes to this, where you think things are going to head. If you think people are making too big of a deal out of stuff, let me know. And at the same time, super chats will be open in the live chat if you want to help donate during this live video broadcast, premiere, I should say. It'd be greatly appreciated. And also, guys, comments will be open during the live video premiere and afterwards. And if you still want to donate, but you can't be here in time for the live video premiere, the super thanks option will be open. So, with that said, with those plugs out of the way, let's get into the topic at hand. Okay? Let's do this. Alright, so I'm sure a lot of you I'm sure you did notice, I should say, but I'm sure a lot of you heard about this, looked at it briefly before you kind of fell asleep last night, went to bed, if you will. But apparently news broke that Netflix. That's right, Netflix. Formerly at one time a mail-in DVD Blu-ray subscription service. Now it's just all streaming. Netflix basically has come out apparently on top in the bidding wars to buy Warner Brothers Discovery, or at least Warner Brothers from Discovery, if you will. Now, what's interesting about this, and I'll read off a little bit of the details, but you'll see it flash across the screen because I screenshotted these in the best way possible so you can read them yourself. But basically, the long end of it here is that the way this is going to go, with Warner Brothers and this deal, if you will, the way this is going to go down is, from the sounds of it, Netflix is only wanting to, buy and own the studio, Warner Brothers Pictures, animation, and all that, as well as the HBO Max and the streaming service. Basically, according to the article, and you'll read it across the screen here, they want to buy they want the assets. They want the assets overall. Now, this is very similar to what Universal / Comcast had offered. They wanted to do the same thing. Paramount, they wanted to outright buy everything. They wanted the whole shaboodle, if you will. They wanted the whole shaboodle, under one roof. But Netflix apparently had the money, had the bigger offer, and Warner Brothers, they bit. They bit the Warner Brothers Discovery. David Zaslav, they bit. They took the bait. And now, basically, they're entering, just between the two sides, they're entering exclusive talks over the next, potentially, year and a half. Now, the reason this takes as long is with any major acquisition, especially one entertainment conglomerate into another, you gotta basically make sure everything that you are agreeing upon in this transaction, is contractually on paper. You got to make sure it's on paper. You got to make copies, stuff like that. But you got to make sure, you got to have the lawyers go over it. You got to make sure it passes votes and everything within the corporations. You got to basically make sure, like I said, everything that's been agreed upon, is going to be followed through on. You see, Netflix has made it known, especially the president, that the main priority is streaming first, everything else second. That's the main priority. Streaming first, everything else second. Well, Netflix, and this is one thing that worries people about Netflix, purchasing, or potentially purchasing, because the deal ain't going to be finalized until, like I said, everything is, cleared up, everything is passed through, there's no, catches, there's no hidden, agendas and stuff like that, that, basically Warner Brothers isn't aware of or nobody else is aware of. This ain't going to be official to, I would almost say, 2027, at least. I mean, it could get done a lot sooner, because sometimes things will go real fast. We've seen that, and it really surprises people, but then, of course, when it goes real fast, that's when the suspicion does come in, and then it gets investigated, and then you find out, oh, this is why it went fast, and then that sale becomes null and void, tainted, if you will, and they have to renegotiate and all that, or they have to put it up for sale again, and somebody else will buy it, and this time they'll buy it straight up and do it the right way, follow the procedures the right way. So basically, again, a lot of things are not going to be finalized until about 2027 at least. But again, getting to what I was saying, one of the things that people worried about with Netflix purchasing it is the theatrical window, because like I said, Netflix's president has made it clear that their streaming that priority, the first numero uno priority, is streaming. Like everything that they license, everything they get behind as an original and everything, that before it hits theaters, it will hit theaters if they make a limited agreement for at least like a weekend or a week or whatever the case might be. But basically, the main priority is that whatever they create or license is going to be streaming first. And then if they feel like, hey, it's a big enough hit that, hey, if it's a movie like K-pop Demon Hunters, that, hey, we'll put it in theaters for a limited time, like they did when they re-released it in time for Halloween as a single, in a sing-along version. But point is, according to a lot of folks, and the president of Netflix makes it sound very, very obvious as well, that the main priority at the end of the day is to put stuff on streaming, to put things on the platform, add more content. And when you read the various articles that are out there, I should say, that are talking about this, then, obviously you see the word content, being used over and over again in those articles. And of course that's going to make you fearful. Of course that's going to make you fearful of the fact that, should this deal, become finalized by the beginning of 2027, which again could be a lot sooner, but a lot of people are projecting 2027, the start of 2027, as the earliest finalization date for this new era in entertainment to begin. Like I said, if you read the word content in there, you see the word content used over and over. Of course, it's going to worry you that Netflix is going to want to just put a lot of the Warner Brothers stuff that would be meant for theaters onto the streaming platform. And, say, screw the theaters, nobody does theaters anymore, here we go. And, again, you have a right to fear that way. You have a right to feel that way and fear that. But Netflix has said that they are willing, to keep Warner Brothers intact as is. Nothing's going to change, and Warner Brothers will still be able to do theatrical, runs for the movies. Now a lot of people will hear this and say, like, yeah, that sounds good, but I'm not entirely sure. Like, how can we truly believe that Netflix is going to be on the up and up on this? Well, again, that's where the negotiations throughout the year, or the next year and a half, as some people are projecting, comes into play. That's where everybody sits down, makes sure everything is, that has been agreed upon is in there, and then of course what happens, and this is true because this has happened with Disney when they acquired 20th Century Fox. This is what happened when they acquired Lucasfilms and even Marvel. Mostly 20th Century Fox, I should say. But, they've had to go through all these different similar situations, including going to Congress, Congress in Washington, D.C., and the House of Representatives and all that, to get the okay, and even to an extent the president themselves, to get the okay to make this happen, or to make that, deal at the time happen between Disney and Fox. They had to go through all that. And now it's going to be Netflix and Warner Brothers' turn, because they're going to have to do, something similar. They're going to have to go through this entire situation, because unlike with Discovery, yeah, they had the money, but Discovery was never on the same, stratosphere. Let's be honest, they were never on the same stratosphere as Warner Brothers. Yeah, they had to go through maybe some similar, hoops and everything to get their deal done to purchase them, but they never had to go through, or they never really had to go through as much as what people are projecting. Because basically, like I said, they're not on the same stratosphere. They're not in the same, the same sentence, if you will, of a Warner Brothers, a Disney, a Universal. They're not, at that level. They're very well known, but they're not at that level. Yes, they have the money to purchase things like Warner Brothers, like like what they did, but they're not at that notable level. And purchasing Warner Brothers, making it part of the portfolio, is what got them noticed. Is what got people talking about them. Because outside of that, nobody cared, about Discovery. I mean, yeah, Discovery was nice for educational reasons and all that. But no one really cared at the end of the day, about Discovery, and its platforms. The only thing people cared about Discovery when it was out was when they expanded and created all these other channels, including the Hub, along with Warner Brothers, And just by creating the hub with Warner Brothers, guess what that gave birth to? Exactly, My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. The phenomenon that became what it was. It still is to this day, but believe it or not. But again, what I'm saying though is basically, Discovery, when they purchased it, yeah, they had to go through the similar hoops, but not as maybe as extravagant, and detailed as what they're gonna have, as what Netflix and Warner Brothers are gonna have to go through this time around. With this, transaction transferring of control and power of Warner Brothers from Discovery to Netflix. They've never had to go through that, during the last transaction when Discovery bought Warner Brothers. That's what I'm trying to say. And I do apologize if I'm a little distracted. Our neighbors' kids like to blast the music real loud, boom, 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 vibrate the whole place sometimes. And I like to put the music out to where you hear what the song is and all that. So I do apologize if I sound a little distracted. But what I'm getting at, though, what I'm trying to get at, though, and everything, is the fact that basically, it's going to take a while before anything does become official. That's what I'm trying to say. It's going to take a while before anything becomes official and a discussion. It's going to take a while. But what's interesting about this, about this exclusive talks that they're going to be going through now, is apparently it has been agreed upon that if things don't follow through, like I mentioned, like if things aren't, on the up and up, like if nothing is in there, that, has been agreed upon, or there's something there that, let's say Warner Brothers isn't, cool with, or Netflix isn't cool with, and all that, there's a stipulation in this deal, or in this contractual agreement to where they're going to be negotiating, that if nothing works out, before anything gets done, before anything is finalized, and all that, that basically Netflix will pay I think $5 billion or $5 million. Oh, not 5 million, but 500 million, I think, or 500 billion. Let me check here, guys. Hold on. Let me bring this up. Let me bring this up real quickly and everything. I think it's in here somewhere. Yeah, 5 billion breakup fee. Basically, again, if nothing works out, in the long run, if nothing works out in the long run, throughout this exclusive transaction, transfer of power kind of thing in the next year, maybe year and a half, more than likely, according to some people, that Netflix will pony up. Netflix will pony up. Pun of phrase. They will pony up $5 billion to give to Warner Brothers to end the negotiations. So that way, what happens afterwards is Warner Brothers can take that $5 billion, and if they still want to sell, they can offer, they can offer that they can use that $5 billion to make an even bigger offer in sale to the other parties that were invested in them, like Paramount, Universal, Comcast, and whoever else wants to, join in the fray. Whoever else wants to join in the fray. But basically, yeah, Netflix buying them, again, a lot of people have a right to feel, a little worried and stuff, because again, when you read the articles, like what you'll be seeing here across the screen on this audio video, if you're watching on YouTube, basically, long story short, you see that, as I mentioned earlier, you see that word content being utilized a lot, and of course it's going to worry you that basically at the end of the day, Netflix is not going to really prioritize Warner Brothers, even though they say Warner Brothers could be on its own still. It's not going to really hurt it. It's not going to change anything truly about it. It's just going to be under the umbrella, saying basically when you watch a movie or watch the start of a show or a movie, it says Warner Brothers Pictures and it says a Netflix company. Again, you have the right to worry. You have the right to feel like basically Netflix is not going to stay true to the word, and that when enough time has passed, should this deal go through, that's when Netflix will show the true colors and start doing things the way people fear they will. But we just have to wait and see, because again, one of the things they have to do is go through Congress and the Senate and all of them, and the House and all that, believe it or not, and even the President to an extent, to get this finalized. And they'll make sure, whether you trust Congress and the House and even the President, that's up to you, that's your opinion. But they will make sure, that basically this deal is on the up and up. They will make sure that Netflix verbally, if not handwritten wise, contractually agrees that they will let Warner Brothers still be Warner Brothers, but that they will not change anything about it. They won't change Warner Brothers' decisions to, put out movies theatrically for 45 to 60 days. They won't change that. That they won't, do this, they won't do that. Anything that people fear, that they feel could endanger the Hollywood business itself, the entertainment business itself. Whether, like I say, you like Congress or the House or the President or not, that's up to you. They will make sure that Netflix abides. They abide, by that, by this agreement, by this contractual agreement, with the transfer of ownership power to them. They will make sure of that, because if Netflix doesn't do that, then what could happen is Warner Brothers, even though they'd be under Netflix, believe it or not, they could take Netflix to court. They could take their parent company to court, if you will, and sue them for a breach of agreement, for breach of contract agreement of not living up to what they said they would do once they purchased the company. They could do that, and if there's one thing any conglomerate, wants, if there's one thing, any conglomerate, wants, or doesn't want, I should say, the last thing any of them want, I should say, if there's any conglomerate, out there, the last thing they want, that's what I was trying to say there, is to be taken to court, especially of the highest power. They don't want that. So Netflix, basically is going to probably have to abide by whatever the contract agreements and everything that they settle on, with Warner Brothers when this, doing this exclusive talks and all that. They're going to have to settle on them, whether they like it or not. Which means the president of Netflix, even though he's mainly more streaming first, everything else second, he's going to have to accept the fact that, okay, the way we do things on the Netflix side, is different than, what they do on the Warner Brothers side, even though they're now part of us. So he's going to have to accept that. He's going to have to be like, yeah, normally I'd have Warner Brothers only do 2 to 3 weeks in theaters and that's it, and you're going straight to Netflix. Nope. He's going to have to live with the fact that from here on in, potentially, he can do his thing with Netflix, but Warner Brothers is still going to have to be allowed to do their thing as if nothing's really changed, except they're now under a different parent company, if that makes any sense. But to get into the discussion about this, and let me see where I'm at right here, guys. Okay. To get into discussion of this, let's read off the article that I screenshotted, if you will, last night. So be right back, guys, so we can talk about this, because this is a big deal, when it comes to entertainment. And again, a lot of people do have a right to worry as to what's going to happen, especially if you see that word content, in there a lot. But let's read about it, okay? Let's read about it. Be right back. Okay, guys, I'm back. I just had to take a little bit of a break there for a second before I start here, reading the article, that is. But the article, and I'm sure you've been seeing it throughout the video here, you've been probably reading it yourself, but the article here basically says this. This was last night, according to this, at 8:03 p.m. Pacific, but right here it says, breaking news, Netflix wins bidding war for Warner Brothers Discovery, will start exclusive deal talks. So there's that. And this is what the article says. I screenshotted it so I can, not have to read constantly all the way through, if you know what I mean. It states, and this is from Deadline, by the way, give credit to Deadline. This is what they say, and I quote, Netflix has emerged victorious with what appears to be the highest bid so far, the winning bid for Warner Bros. Discovery, Deadline has learned, and will start exclusive talks to finalize the deal. This caps a tumultuous day that saw Paramount move aggressively to counter the giant streamer and seal a deal of its own for WBD. Now, like I mentioned earlier, that, and I'll read about it here too, that $5 billion breakup fee if things fall through. Basically, Warner Brothers could take that, use it as part of their sales offer to, be bought by somebody else, and the next ones in line would be Paramount to potentially buy them if things don't, fall through with Netflix. But continuing on, Netflix offered a $28 a share for WBD, according to sources mostly in cash. It's been a fast-moving process and one that will reshape the entertainment landscape dramatically. WBD put itself on the block in October to open up the process after receiving 3 consecutive offers from Paramount. Warner had hoped to get a deal in place by mid to late December. Netflix would acquire the Warner Bros. Studios and HBO Max streaming assets. Paramount's offer was for all of WBD. Bloomberg is reporting that Netflix offered a $5 billion breakup fee if the deal fails to close. Comcast also bid for studio and streaming businesses. So basically what this means is, let's say, and I've mentioned them before because they are part of this to an extent. I've mentioned this before because they're part of this to an extent. If you're an AEW fan, right now, you may not have much to worry about. As far as what the future holds. But you might want to talk, through social media and through your attendance, at these shows on Wednesday and Saturday. You might want to make it vocally known to Tony Khan that he might have to kind of reshape, the way he does things with AEW. He may have to look into, I guess you could say, upping his game and getting back to what made AEW what it was, or at least close to it, so that way they could be, at least viable to remain, where they are, or viable to whoever else might want to look into them. So, again, nothing, not too much doom and gloom, but again, you might want that to be known to Tony. Now, continuing on, and I quote, Paramount has argued that it was the only one of the 3 offers with a clear path to closing, insisting in a letter to WBD that the rival offers from Netflix and Comcast both present serious issues that no regulatory will be able to ignore. It believes Netflix, being the dominant streamer in the U.S. and globally, would face major antitrust hurdles, adding HBO Max. Let me see if I did I get the adding HBO Max to the fold. Sorry, like I said, I had to screenshot this. You'll notice it across the screen, but I had to screenshot this in different ways so I can get the whole context of, the article. Continuing on, David Ellison's company, which is Paramount, also called the sale process unfair and tilted towards Netflix. WBD countered that its board attends to its fabricatory obligations. Not fabricated, but fiducial obligations with the utmost care, and that they have fully and robustly complied with them and will continue to do so. So basically what Paramount is doing, and they sent this letter out, if you will, to kind of, I guess, make this deal look like it's not on the up and up. Paramount basically called out a lot of this BS, especially with a meeting that took place in Germany, if you will. I can't think of the town's name right now, but it was between Netflix and Warner Brothers Discovery, mostly the international representative, and basically they called them out for this not being fair to them and potentially anybody else. So Paramount's like, look, we had so basically the way it sounds like to me is Paramount saying, hey, we had the best offer, we had the right of way, we had first dibs, and yet now you're doing this. It's like, to them, it's like, you're screwing us. You're screwing the business. Why? Why couldn't you just be a little bit more patient? That's basically what I'm getting from this. That's what I'm getting from this. Continuing on. All right. In a violent attack on WBD CEO David Zaslav, Paramount claimed the, quote, sales process has been tainted by management conflicts, including certain members of management's potential personal interest in post-transaction roles and compensation, as a result of the economic incentives embedded in recent amendments to employment arrangements. Paramount had offered Zaslav a role if the companies were to merge. Zaslav's compensation agreement was recently reconstructed to take into account a sale of WBD versus the formal separation of its business into two public companies that was originally planned. Zaslav would have become CEO of a slimmed-down Warner Brothers, with WBD's current CFO, Gunnar Rudolphus, running a standalone linear television company called Discovery Global, which it definitely looks like they're heading for right now, with the talk here and potentially how things will go in the next year, potentially more likely year and a half, according to people. Basically, that's what we're looking at. That Netflix is just going to have the Warner Brothers studios, pictures, animation, and all that, the games and all that, along with the HBO Max streaming service, while the CFO, Gunnar, he's going to be running Discovery Global, and that itself will be up for sale as well eventually as a separate entity to whoever might be the highest bidder in that perspective. And again, like I said earlier, if you're an All Elite Wrestling fan, AEW fan, right now it doesn't feel like you have nothing to worry about, but you might want to basically, like I said earlier, let Tony Khan know, let him be advised of, hey, you need to get things on the up and up. You need to get things together so that way you have a fighting chance to remain after your initial media rights contract with TNT and TBS and all of them is done. But we'll get into that in a moment. But anyway, continuing on. Okay. It seems fair to say that a good deal of ill will was built up between the two camps. It's not clear what role Zaslav would play in WBD merger with Netflix. Warner Bros. Discovery shares are up nearly 6% at $26 in very late aftermarket trading, a 52-week high. That's nearly 4 times its low for the year. That's nearly 4 times its low for the year of $7.50. The shares would have been sluggish since Discovery acquired Warner Media in April of 2022, perking up dramatically this fall when it emerged as a takeover target. All three buyers, therefore, were offering a significant premium to pre-merger chatting stock price, quote, willing to pay for the elimination of a competitor, the acquisition of franchise control. And I'm just trying to read this, make sure I get it. Okay. What was I? Oh yeah. Let me reread this. All three buyers, therefore, were offering a significant premium to pre-merger chatter stock price, quote, willing to pay for the elimination of a competitor, the acquisition of franchise control, and the synergy potential of integrating one of the most valuable content and IP libraries in the world into the platform, wrote BOFA analyst Jessica Reif Eric in a recent note. She called Warner Bros. Studio with IP ranging from Harry Potter to DC Comics to Game of Thrones a quote crown jewel, which is true. They do have a lot of robust IPs under the catalog, under their umbrella, that basically would make any potential buyer and parent company probably the envy of a lot of others, if you will, a lot of other companies. Let me make sure I get this right. Okay, continuing on. It says it's hard to overstate what a major pivot this deal would be for Netflix, which has made very few acquisitions, preferring to grow organically. Quote, well, Netflix, and this is when that's Jessica Girl, she says, and I quote, well, Netflix is the clear streaming leader in subscribers it still lags other media companies on deep IP libraries that could offer potential use cases for theme parks, experience, Broadway shows, gaming, and merchandising. While Netflix has long maintained the M&A was a distraction, and that the company would build its own franchise more efficiently than buying them, the landscape has shifted. Continuing on, she continues on and says this. Acquiring DC Comics, Harry Potter, Hanna-Barbera, and other WBD library properties would provide Netflix with a deep set of well-known IP. Further, the acquisition would provide Netflix with physical production capacity and prestige that could help to court talent at another level. Now, I think that's all she said. Now, continuing on, this is what I think that's all that Jessica girl said. So, continuing on, the article says this. Should the deal go through, Netflix would gain a global theatrical distribution apparatus, a massive library that includes titles from DC Studios, Turner Entertainment, HBO, New Line, and the MGM pre-May 1986 catalog. Exhibition has been fearful of a Warner Brothers Netflix union. Let me reread that again. It states, Exhibition has been fearful of a Warner Brothers Netflix union. Netflix co-CEO is known to favor a 17 exclusive theatrical window before movies arrive in the home. Well, the number one circuit, AMC, has been lobbying for a 45-day window. The two sides have been far apart in the streaming. The two sides have been far apart in that the streaming awards contenders this year, House of Dynamite, Wake Up Dead Man, and what is the other one? Okay, Wake Up. Okay, let me try to make sure I get this right. Okay, House of Dynamite, Wake Up Dead Man, Jay, Kelly, and Frankenstein didn't receive any screens in the top 3 circuits given the 17-day theatrical window. To date, Netflix only movie to number 1 was K-pop Demon Hunters Sing-Along during the last weekend of August. Okay, it was August, not October. I thought it was October. I think they did bring it back out for October. I think they did. Yeah, they did. I'm pretty sure of that. Okay, but they say, to date, Netflix's only movie to number 1 was K-pop Demon Hunters Sing-Along during the last weekend of August, which made $19 million over 2 days. All circuits played in Sans AMC. Okay, so that's the article there. Now, there is other news that has come out. Again, like I mentioned, the whole Paramount accusing, of underhanded stuff and everything and all that. But as you read here in the video, basically, yeah, they've won the bidding war, but the actual war, the actual battle of ownership, the ownership battle, the parent company war, the parent company, battle is far from over. Because, like I said earlier, they got to make sure everything that they will work on, agreement-wise, as to what happens here, what happens there, this and that. They have to make sure everything is on the up and up. And then, like I said earlier, and I do apologize if I was distracted. Again, our neighbors' kids like to blast their music loud for some reason from the cars. But anyway, like I said earlier, they still have to go through, this very, I guess you could say, Ingress kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? They have to go, hold on guys, hold on. Sorry about that. They still have to go through these Ingress high hurdles, if you will, to get everything done. They still have to go through all these obstacles. That's what the word I was looking for. Ingress obstacles to get to a final deal, to make sure, to basically make this a reality for both sides. And again, one of the things they have to go through with one of the things, major obstacle-wise, they have to go through is dealing with the Congress, dealing with with the House of Representatives, and potentially the President, because they got to make sure, that everything is on the up and up. that, as I said earlier, before I got a little distracted, and I do apologize for that, they got to make sure that there's nothing hidden in this agreement that is not agreed upon. They got to make sure that when Netflix acquires this, that if Warner Brothers still wants to release their movies into theaters and keep them in there for 45 to 60 days, basically a month and a half or 2 months, if they want to do that, they got to make sure, if that's agreed upon, that there's no little like stipulation or loophole in there that changes that Netflix could use to change that. They got to make sure things are on the up and up, and that Netflix is not just buying Warner Brothers, if you will, Warner Brothers Discovery. They're not just buying it so they could just add more content to their streaming platform. They're gonna make sure, again, whether you like Congress or agree with Congress or trust them, and the same with the House and the President, that's up to you. But they got to make sure that Netflix isn't just buying this to add content to the streaming platform. They got to make sure that Netflix is going to be on the up and up, and they're going to basically live by what they agree upon. That they're going to follow through on what they agree upon, because if not, and they find little holes in the agreement that even Warner Brothers may not be aware of, that's when this could fall apart, and Netflix would have no choice but to basically pay the $5 billion breakup fee to Warner Brothers, who, as I mentioned earlier, could use that to not only maybe salvage a little bit of the studio, keep it afloat on its own for a little bit longer, and pay off some of the debt they have, if you will, but also use it to help get, probably a major better offer, or better major offer, however you want to phrase it, or however I phrase it. I do apologize for that. But basically they could use that to, basically not only, like I said, pay off some of that debt and keep themselves afloat independently for a little longer, but they could use it to make, and get an even bigger, more major league offer from the others, like Universal, Comcast, Paramount, maybe Amazon, Apple, whoever wants to come into play, Disney, maybe, who knows, whoever wants to come into play, if you will, play, basically become the next, potential parent company. Warner Brothers, with that breakup fee, can make that happen. Again, they could stay afloat independently for a little longer, pay off a bit of the debt, and thus use it to try to make a bigger offer, a better offer to be sold, to somebody like Paramount or Comcast or Universal or whoever. If the deal with Netflix falls through, because again, part of them going through this whole thing and then going to going to our nation's capital and all that and everything. And basically, basically they got to go through all these hoops, all these obstacles, and all that to make sure that everything is not just on the up and up, that everything that's been agreed upon is there, but to make sure there's no added loopholes that, like I said, WBD or even Netflix to an extent may not be aware of. Because if there's any additional loopholes or holes and everything, steps that neither side is aware of, this deal ain't going to go through. So, to make it clear before everybody gets into the doom and gloom of, oh, it's over. Look, first of all, not to go off tangent, not to go off topic here, but every time people do that, whether it's here on YouTube, podcasting, or wherever, they only do that to get people's attention. Let's be honest, okay? Let's just be honest. You do that basically to get attention. So please, I ask, in my opinion, please, don't do that. Just be honest. Just be straightforward, okay? Don't do that, because I know you feel like it gets you clicks and everything, but you know what gets you more views and clicks? Honesty. So be honest, okay? That's all I'm asking. But now, to get back on topic. And everything, like I said, this is going to take a while. So anybody that's worried about, oh, this is going to happen and this is going to happen, yeah, like I said earlier, you have a right to have a little fear in that, okay? You do have a right to fear, that Netflix is going to, hold up the end of the deal and all that. That's fine. But that's why they got to go through these obstacles. That's why they got to go through these hoops. This is why they got to go to Washington and all that, to make sure things on the up and up, so that way there isn't no holes, there isn't no hidden stipulations and all that, that Netflix or even Warner Brothers could pull on each other, in the long run during this, during this agreement, during this, new merger and everything. Basically, that's why they're going to, that's why they have to make sure everything, everything that's agreed upon is there. And whether the Netflix co-CEO or co-CFO or the CEO or CFO themselves, like it or not, if part of that agreement that they have to hold up to, is to allow Warner Brothers to have a regular theatrical run outside of what they would do, then so be it. And you know what? Maybe it might be beneficial for them, because maybe by owning Warner Brothers and allowing them to have that regular theater run, Netflix can come to the realization of, oh, that's how you do a movie. Oh, that's how you get people to watch a movie, especially when it comes to streaming. If people see it first on the big screen, for as long as it's there before it comes here, it might, the positive is it might change the dynamic to where they'll be like, you know what? Let's test out at least a 30-day window, see what happens. And they might be surprised. They might be surprised. But again, it's all up to what happens over the next year, or a year and a half, as a lot of people are saying is more than likely. Because again, like I said, just because they won the bidding war and now they're going to enter exclusive talks, doesn't mean it's far from over. It doesn't mean this is, done. It's finalized. What this means, and again, Netflix is basically offering to pay $5 billion if nothing works out. What this means, again, throughout the next year, year and a half, is that they're going to make sure all the I's and T's are connecting. They're going to make sure everything is on the up and up. They're going to make sure this is agreed upon, that's agreed upon. They're going to make sure that Netflix, even though the parent company, will let Warner Brothers still make their own decisions, and go in this direction, that direction, if they have to, without any true interference unless needed. Those are the kind of things that are going to probably be discussed over the next year. So for anybody that's worried about, oh, this is going to change things. Yeah, it's going to change things, but it might change things for Netflix, for the better when it comes to basically testing out movies in theaters and on bigger screens, multiple screens with bigger, names behind them like Regal and Cinemark and AMC. Basically, this might be beneficial for them because it might send a message of, hey, if Netflix is willing to take a chance and go from 17 days to 30 days, with theatrical releases, that might send a message to Apple. That will send a message to Amazon, to do the same thing. And that's doing it as well. They're doing it as well, don't get me wrong, but they might be more encouraged to do it more so if they see Netflix, of all people, is willing to do it right out, right off the gate, or after a while, after seeing maybe the success Warner Brothers is going to have. So we'll see what happens. We shall see what happens. But as I mentioned earlier, if you're an AEW fan, right now you don't have much to worry about. Although you might have some things to worry about, in the long run. Maybe you might have some things to worry about in the long run, because here's what an article on Facebook said. This is from one of the wrestling groups on Facebook. This is what they said, and I quote. This is from one of the people there. I can't see their name right now, but you'll see it on the screen. But they basically put this article up about, I would say, 2 hours ago. It was an hour when I screenshotted this, but this is what they said about an hour ago, and I quote, AT&T practically killed Warner Brothers when they owned it. They ran it into the ground prior to Discovery and David Zaslav taking... Oh, no, this is not wrestling. This is David Zaslav. This is Zaslav. Okay, not David Zaslav. This is John Campea. Excuse me. Now I'm starting to see it. Okay. This is John Campea. Now, John Campea, let me explain this guy. And I'm sure those of you that follow him already know this. But John Campea was not fond of the idea that Netflix might buy Warner Brothers. He wasn't. And he wasn't fond of the potential that, that Apple TV, that Apple itself could buy Warner Brothers. He wasn't fond of that. The reason being is his belief, and again, justifiably so, like a lot of people, is that basically Netflix would not make theatrical movies that are meant for theaters the priority. That they would probably let it run in theaters, but only be like for a week or two, and then that's it. And oh, here it is on Netflix about 2 weeks after it was in theaters. That's what he's worried about, and rightfully so. And that's why he didn't like the idea. But the more he looks into it, the more information that comes out, he's starting to think, yeah, he's starting to kind of have this belief, like, well, not a belief, but he's starting to have this opinion of, yeah, I don't like the idea, but hey, if they're willing to pony up $5 billion for a breakup fee if things don't work out, and Warner Brothers could use that to go and, try to get a better offer for somebody else and maybe even stabilize themselves for a little longer independently, then maybe this isn't so bad. He's trying to look at the bright side, but here's what he says, and I quote. This is from John Campea, and I quote, AT&T practically killed Warner Brothers when they owned it. They ran it into the ground prior to Discovery and David Zaslav taking it over. WB didn't have its own standalone stock market listing, but upon the sale, the quote value of the new WBD company was at $16.50 per share. That was the opening 3 months stock price average. That's what the market thought WB was worth. David Zaslav not only prevented WB from dying as a result of the AT&T inflicted wounds, he turned it around, and now, just 3.5 years later, WB is selling for nearly $28 per share. The fact that WB even still exists today is a damn near miracle after the AT&T fiasco. I took a lot of crap these past few years supporting the moves that David Zaslav was making to allow WB to survive. But at the end of the day, he won. He kept it alive against all odds. He got them on the right track and increased the value of the company 70% in under 4 years. He made some unpopular moves and declarations, but they were always ones necessary for the overall survival of the company. While everyone complained and booed and jeered, he just kept doing the job. Now let's see if Netflix kills it again like AT&T, or if they can keep the momentum going. And you see, that's the other thing too. That's the other thing too right there. You see, even at the end there, he, like I said, and like a lot of you, is fearful to feel like, okay, Netflix could potentially destroy it, but he's also looking at the positives after reading about, because he does research. He does look into a lot of things. He makes sure to look at all the details, and what's being agreed upon and stuff like this. And him saying at the end to see whether or not Netflix will kill it like AT&T did, or if they'll keep the momentum going. That last part where he says, or if they'll keep the momentum going, that's him looking at that positive side of things, especially, like I said, with the information that's come out on how the sale is going to be done, and everything. So that's a good sign. So it's a good sign, in my opinion, that at least he is basically, turning it around when it comes to, his opinions, on stuff. It's a good thing to hear. Now, here's where the wrestling comes in, and I quote. This is from one of the wrestling group pages, and I quote, breaking. Netflix stuns the industry with massive $82.7 billion purchase of Warner Bros. Discovery. Netflix has officially bought Warner Bros. Discovery in a historic $82.7 billion deal, a move that could completely reshape the entertainment world and put AEW's future in some serious doubt. AEW's home falls under the WBD banner. Now that Netflix is taking control, or potentially will take control, they need to reword this. Now that Netflix has officially bought Warner Bros. Discovery, where was I? Okay. let me reread this. AEW's home falls under the WBD banner. Now that Netflix is potentially taking control, there could be some big changes, with Netflix already investing huge in WWE. There's no guarantee they'll want another wrestling company competing on the platform. And yes, for everyone asking about TNT/TBS, the official Netflix announcement confirms that the linear cable networks TNT, TBS, CNN, Discovery Channel, etc., will be spun off into a separate company called Discovery Global. However, this does not mean AEW is automatically safe. Ownership changes always lead to new strategies, new budgets, and new priorities. Even if TNT/TBS aren't going directly to Netflix at this time, AEW's relationship still traces back to WBD leadership and a shifting corporate structure now tied to the largest streamer in the world. In other words, things can still change fast. If AEW doesn't fit Netflix's evolving strategy of big global brands and streamlined content, Tony Khan may be forced to find a new media partner or rebuild AEW's entire broadcast model. Netflix co-CEO Ted Sarandos said, "By combining Warner Bros.' incredible library with our cultural defining titles, we'll be able to entertain the world even better." WBD CEO David Zaslav added, "Together with Netflix, we'll ensure people everywhere continue to enjoy the world's most resonant stories for generations." And then they close out by saying this, translation, Netflix wants top-tier franchises. Great news for WWE, not so great for AEW. The next year could be the most uncertain era in AEW's broadcast history. And the source is Netflix and Warner Bros. Discovery. Now to correct this article here. Now correct this article, okay? First of all, they won the bidding war. They don't own them yet. Quote, they don't, and I want to emphasize this, they do not own Warner Brothers yet. They don't own them yet. Okay, let me emphasize that. They don't own them yet. They just won the bidding war. They just won the bidding war. Okay? So what that means, as I mentioned earlier, is over the next year and a half, or next year period, 2026, will be, something to keep an eye on if you're an entertainment fan, a wrestling fan, a sports fan, what have you. It's going to be very interesting to keep an eye on because you're going to want to see exactly what is done. Now, yes, Discovery Global is going to be a separate company and everything, but even though it's spun off into its own company, it's still technically is going to be under the Warner Brothers / Netflix banner if the deal goes through. Remember, Netflix is offering a $500 billion, I think that's what it is, $500 billion breakup fee. I think what it is, $500 or $5 billion breakup fee. Hold on, let me double check, guys. Let me double check. Hold on. Should be. Let me see where it's at. Okay, $5 billion, not $500 billion. $500 billion would save the butt, but $5 billion breakup fee. They are offering a $5 billion breakup fee if things don't work out. Things don't work out. So basically, should things work out and everything, then by extension, Discovery Global would be still under and associated with Warner Bros. / Netflix. But if things don't work out and they have to break things off, then Warner Brothers will take that money, as I mentioned earlier, use it to pay off some debt, kind of stabilize themselves independently for a little longer, but then use it to, try to make a better offer or a better, proposal, for, basically make themselves look better is what I'm trying to say. Make themselves look better from a financial offering perspective, sale perspective, to the likes of Paramount, Comcast, Universal, and so on. And what that would mean basically is, let's say Netflix let's say the Netflix deal falls through. Let's say the Netflix deal falls through. Then basically Paramount, after, like I said, Warner Brothers uses that $5 billion to stabilize themselves, pay off debts, and make themselves look better on the sales block. Paramount could come in, make that offer they made initially, and then win that bidding war, and then use the rest of 2026 and maybe most of 2027, or at least half of 2027, to finalize the deal. And what that would mean is they wouldn't just be buying, Warner Brothers Pictures, Studios, and all that, and HBO Max streaming. No, they'd be buying everything. They'd be buying the whole shaboodle, the whole shebang, if you will. But it all depends on if this deal falls through, because again, it still has a lot of hurdles. It still has a lot of obstacles it's got to go through, including going to Washington and the Congress and the House, and, and the Senate and the President potentially and all that. It's still got to go through all these hoops to ensure that everything is on the up and up. Now, let's say if it does go through, things do end up on the up and up. Let's say for instance, just play a little devil's advocate here. Let's say it does go through. Does it affect AEW? From a linear cable perspective, not necessarily. Yes, again, like I said, Discovery Global would still be, kind of, an extension of Warner Brothers slash Netflix. So it could have some effect, not much. But if they're going to operate as their own separate company, within that bubble, then maybe part of the agreement is that they can make their own decisions and no one has any final say. So, so basically, if this CFO, who's going to be the guy running things, this Gunner guy, if he decides, hey, I want to keep Tony Khan and AEW afloat, I want to keep him abroad, abroad and afloat and on our network for the next foreseeable future, then, then if the agreement, part of this deal, part of this, this acquisition, these discussions, the negotiations, if part of that deal is to let them have that final say, and this Gunner guy, is the one that is able to have that final say, and he says, hey, I want to keep, AEW afloat on our networks for the for the foreseeable future, for the next several years. And, part of the agreement is Netflix has no final say, and the only final say comes from them. Then AEW, what I'm trying to get at, AEW would basically, be fine. They'd be, they would be, breathing a sigh of relief. They'd be like, shoo, they'd basically be, thrilled. They'd be celebrating. There's no doubt. They'd be celebrating, that, for the fact that they have survived, this transition, this change, this change in atmosphere and all that. They'd be able to do that. But that's only if that's part of the negotiation deal, that when Discovery Global becomes its own thing, still by extension part of WBD slash Netflix, they become their own thing. Then basically, if that's part of the deal, then they wouldn't have to worry about any final say coming down from Netflix or anything like them, or even Warner Brothers. They wouldn't have to worry about that. They can make the decision themselves. But here's what things do get interesting. The pay-per-views are now part of HBO Max. Now you might say, now you might hear this and be like, oh, don't worry about that. If HBO Max is not going to carry them anymore, they still have Prime Video. They still have Thriller TV. They still have linear cable pay-per-view. Yes, true. But here's the deal. HBO Max allows people to have the pay-per-views, the PLEs, at $10 less than what they would pay for Prime Video, or pay as a part of Prime Video, pay as a part of Thriller TV, pay on regular linear cable pay-per-view. They basically allow them to watch the pay-per-views, the PLEs on HBO Max, for $39. $39, which is pretty good. That's pretty good. But again, that's where things get interesting, because contractually, AEW has AEW has a contract with them to allow that to happen. And if things go through with Netflix and they become the parent company, and Netflix is in this deal with WWE and TKO, which, by the way, is entering its first year next month, and then by the time this deal gets potentially done, be in its second year, that can make things complicated, in the long run as far as pay-per-views go, because if people can't pay, because look, let's be honest, people like being able to pay for things that are, in other places a little bit more, but in one place could be cheaper. They like paying for the lesser price, right? Right? They like paying for that lesser price, so that way they don't have to worry, about spending $10 or $20 more, right? That they feel they could save for whatever. So when you think about it, people that are kind of okay with this, with the HBO Max show presentation of the PLEs at $10 less of the other places, do you think they're going to be okay with HBO Max potentially, not being able to do that anymore because of Netflix association with WWE, and they're going to have to get rid of that? Of course not. They're not going to be happy. They're not going to be happy with that, because what that means is they would have to go back to paying $10 more, $20 more. They're not going to like that. But there's that potential it could happen. There's that potential it could happen. And speaking of HBO Max, what's interesting too is part of the deal, part of the negotiation deal, is HBO Max could be kept as its own separate streaming platform, right? I mean, we see that with Hulu right now until next month. Because next month, the platform known as Hulu is no more, but it's still its own separate streaming service. Yeah, as strange as that sounds, it's still its own separate streaming service. It's just going to be now a hub, a hub within Disney Plus. That's what it's going to be. It's going to be a hub within Disney Plus. I mean, basically, you could use your Disney, your My Disney account to basically sign in to Hulu, to ESPN, and of course Disney Plus. But you could use it for all of that. You can use it all for all of that. So that's that's cool. That's that's nice to see and everything. But what I'm getting at, the reason I say that is potentially you could see something similar with with HBO Max. Unless the agreement is, like I said, to keep it its own separate streaming platform for at least another 5 years or 3 to 5 years, that's one thing. But if part of the deal is, hey, we'll keep it around, but we're going to make it a hub. We're going to make it a category people are going to be able to click on when they come to Netflix, but they'll still have to pay, let's say a certain amount, then that's another story. I mean, yeah, it still keeps HBO Max as its own entity, except now you have to go into Netflix and click on it there. Which some might say, it's better than going all over the place. Yeah, but the thing is, you'd still have to pay a separate price. So that might be part of the deal too. That might be part of the deal too. But then again, the other part of the deal that could be interesting is if they make it part of Netflix, make it its own thing, but they add on the subscription price that you're paying right now, which for me is like $17, $16.99. Could I get the premium one? They could take that and add it on to the premium price that they have right now. Like for me, I pay $25, $24.99 a month, right? I pay that. So they could take that 17 and add it to that 25, and they could basically say, okay, for $42 a month, you get everything ad-free. Nothing, is going to interrupt you. And it's like, really? So you're saying, and you'd be like, really? So you're saying basically we'd still be able to keep things as is, except now we have to pay, we have to pay $42 because you're going to add on the $16.99 a month that we pay to the Netflix bill and make it, to some that'll be a good thing because it's like, hey, at least I save, or to some I say, hold on guys, I'm getting a brain fart here, hold on. Sorry about that, had a brain fart, and I was getting tongue-tied too, but still. Point is, people will look at that, and they might be okay with it because, yeah, they're still paying pretty much the same for both services, but they're now merged into one and everything. But they might also be not so cool with it because it's like, well, wait a minute, you're going to raise my Netflix price to, to basically the $17 I'm paying individually for HBO Max because now you're adding that as a part of your portfolio and you're making its own little hub, its own little category. They may be fun with it, they may not be. It's going to be interesting to see, But again, that's why we got to keep an eye on what happens over this next year. Because HBO Max, the agreement could be leave it alone, let it be its own thing, and all that. It'll be under the Netflix banner. And part of the deal is, hey, we'll just, simultaneously have movies on both platforms and everything. Or hey, we might, integrate. We might integrate the shows. Like some Netflix originals might end up on HBO Max, and some HBO originals might end up on Netflix, for all we know. I mean, the new, what is that? That new Game of Thrones series they put out a trailer for yesterday. That's an HBO Max original, right? And of course, that's going to be part of HBO Max. If this deal goes through, it cannot just be an HBO. And let's say part of the deal is to keep HBO Max separate, and Netflix separate as streaming platforms. But part of that deal is, hey, after let's say a month, after a month, basically some of the new episodes that debuted that month for this series show up on Netflix, you know, that could be something. That could be something because people will be like, well, I want to save money, so I'll just because if information comes out, that they could basically, long story short, if information comes out that they could basically, get the same stuff on Netflix, but a month or a few weeks later that they would get on HBO Max, then a lot of people might consider canceling HBO Max, being like, hey, if we're going to get this a month later or a week later, we don't need HBO Max. We're good. So they might do that, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Like I said, it's something to really keep, your eyes on. Keep your eyes on and just keep your ears close to, and, to see exactly what's going to, be that next step. Because again, I know I'm being repetitive here when I say this, they still got to go through a lot of hoops. They still got to go through a lot of hoops and everything, a lot of obstacles, including going to Washington to get this made, to get this deal finalized and made into a reality. So they still got a lot to go through. They got a lot to go through. So again, if you're an AEW fan, you're okay right now, but like I said earlier, you might want to make it vocally known to Tony Khan, get your act together, because this could be trouble for you in the long run, even if your weekly shows are on the linear cable networks that are part of Discovery Global. They're still by extension associated with Warner Brothers / Netflix. And also, if HBO Max is part of the Netflix portion of things, the main Netflix portion of things, that could be troublesome too for you. So you got to keep an eye on that. And again, if you're a fan, you need to let Tony Khan know. He's got to get his act together if he wants that linear network to keep him around. And he wants, HBO Max, whether it's still its own thing, integrated as a hub, but still its own thing, or it's integrated as a hub into Netflix, and they combine both, monthly prices. They combine both monthly prices and all that. You basically gotta let it be known to Tony, hey, if you want to survive, you want to keep things going on both ends, get your act together. Time to stop with what you feel is going to be, attractive to the sickos and to a niche crowd, and start thinking bigger picture. Broader picture, bigger and broader picture. So basically, if I'm an AEW sicko or diehard, I would do that. Let him know. Wake him up, if you will. Let him know time to stop thinking small and niche, and sicko-wise, and get more into the broader, bigger picture. That's what he needs to do. And that's what you as fans should help him do. But again, this is going to be interesting. There could be a lot of things that are positive and negative on both, for both sides, but we'll see. And hey, for all we know, it may not even go through. For all we know, it may not go through. Congress may say no. This is this. We can't allow this. They're going to have to. Netflix would have to pay the breakup fee, and then hey, Paramount could come in and say, hey, here we are. We're going to do the right thing. Or here comes Universal and Comcast. Hey, we're going to do the right thing. Or Amazon. Here, we're going to do the right thing. Or Disney, and so on. Somebody else could come in and, swoop down and say, we'll do it. And we'll do it right. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But anyway, though, guys, that's all I'm going to say on it right now. Let me know what your thoughts are. I know some of you are concerned, and rightfully so. But I think you should quell those concerns, put those to the side until the right time. Because again, we don't know what's going to happen. Only God knows. So that's all I'm going to really say, guys. I know this is probably longer than you expected, but let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below, as well as in the live chat during the premiere, if you haven't already. As well as if you want to donate, the super thanks will be open if you didn't already in the super chat. Super thanks will be open if you want to check that out. It'd be greatly appreciated if you could do that and everything. But love to hear your opinions. Love to hear your opinions on this. And until next time, guys, that's all I'm going to really say. So until then, do me a solid favor. That's like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. And also, guys, click on the links in the description to find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube, as well as to support me outside of YouTube as well. And click on the affiliated programs, stores, I should say, to get stuff there in time for your Christmas for yourself, for families, and all that. It helps you out for Christmas shopping. It helps the stores out, and it helps me out through a commission. But guys, give me your thoughts. Love to hear what you have to say on this. And until then, I'll talk to y'all later.